Hey, it's Monday night. It's Dialogue with Dozy, with your boy Dozel. I'm Dozy, Dozel Varner. I'm in tonight. KB will be with us a little later. I think there is a game or something he might be setting up for with friends. I'm not sure. Don't let me say it if I don't know. Anyway, the dialogue. What a show we got for you tonight here on Dialogue with Dozy. We are so happy to have you with us. This is tonight's dialogue is I tell you what, I'll wait to introduce my guest and then we'll do the disclaimer that's due tonight. On with us to talk tonight's show are Vicki, a retired Illinois appellate court justice, Vicki Wright. She has been just a good friend of our family, and we met professionally and just been friends ever since. Vicki's coming on now. She's coming to us from, I think, Morrison, Illinois. She'll tell us. And coming to us from Orlando, first time on the dialogue, is Brother David Abrams. Abrams, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you what they do. Vicki is doing something real exciting right now. I'll let them tell you. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey, Dozel.
Hey, Dave. Vicki, tell us what you're doing now.
Well, I'm trying to adjust to retirement. I am officially retired as of December 1st, and I have been on the bench for 30 years, and I feel like I'm just ending a 30-year love affair. So I'm trying to find this new lifestyle without deadlines and briefs and angst. So I'm adjusting.
That sounds to me the way retirement should be, right?
Yeah. I'm in Illinois, so it's very snowy, and we can't really get outside and enjoy the great outdoors. I think it's like 12 degrees here today or yesterday. So when the weather warms up, I'll be able to feel my days a little bit better.
Vicki, how hard would it hurt you if I told you that wearing short pants? I played a round of golf today. Outside.
You're killing me. I'm happy that you get to enjoy. I'm so happy you have good health and you can be outdoors and we're not locked down anymore. So I'm happy for you.
Amen. That was something. Dave, introduce yourself. And new to the dialogue, Dave and I met through a mutual friend, a great friend, Jack Strickland. And Jack is he knows everybody in every facet. And just introduce yourself to the dialogue, if you would, please, Dave. And tell us what you're doing now.
Well, I'm David Abrams, and I live in Orlando, Florida, where I practice consumer rights law. And I've been doing that for about 17 years. It's actually my second career. We were talking before the show. I was a registered nurse before I became a lawyer. So I like to say I'm a nurse who practices law. Mm-hmm. The cases that I work on tend to be the things that impact the lives of the average individual and family. I don't represent any business clients. I do a lot of landlord-tenant stuff, small class actions, abusive debt collection practices, that type of stuff. And it's a nice way to make a living, and I enjoy doing it.
Are you in semi-retirement or something like that, Jack?
No, I'm in the middle of my career. I'm hoping I've got another 20 or more years in front of me doing this. I was actually the 2020 the Florida Bar named me the Consumer Rights Lawyer of the Year. So
wow.
I'm in the middle of my career.
Wow.
I'm so glad that you and Vicki got a chance to meet and greet in pre-production and just share she's a wonderful soul. I'm sure you've already learned that. And I knew in our initial conversations that you're the same, Dave. And we're just looking forward tonight to a very lively civil discussion about the fate of our nation.
Okay.
David, I'm so glad they recognized you. You know, that you've been recognized, because so many people work very hard, and not that you work for the recognition, but it is really nice when your peers recognize you like that. So congratulations.
Amen. Amen.
It was
Amen.
really, you know, in the middle of the pandemic hitting, it was really a nice thing to have happen.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Well, God does that to us.
Well, amen. 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 Well,
just when we need it most, you know, he puts a little pebble in front of us. So Dozell is that for me.
It's that axiom in our church that says he may not come when you want him, but he's always on time. So that's the way we see it. Look, I want to, before we lead into tonight's show, and tonight we're discussing a very important topic. And when we got ready to do this, and I debated whether or not to have this type of show, we have a loyal viewer that Kim brought onto the show. Dave, I met Jack through Kim. So when I told him that I had a guest that Jack was bringing on, he said, "Man, as soon as I get home, I'll be on." So he's excited. But we have and she's away watching the game. I'm sure we're losing some people that catch the show in the rerun. Fern O'Quinn. Fern is a lovely soul. She's out of Jacksonville. She retired from I think Southern Bell, and then also the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I'm probably more center. Fern is probably more center right than I am. And when I do these topics, I'm always careful that we don't do anything to be offensive, but I don't want to be I want to display the top integrity. And so I was concerned that this would be offensive, but I want to give this disclaimer. So tonight's show, which is entitled, it asks the question, is America's democracy in peril? This show is not about any political persuasion or person. We are not trying to point fingers. We're not trying to dig at. We're not reaching for. We're simply trying to present the historical facts, the facts as they exist now. And tonight's show is slated as a solutions-based dialogue to help us become one nation under God, which is in our Constitution, in which we all live by and believe in. So I have two counselors who were formerly trained. One has retired. She'll always be a counselor, and I'm sure they'll be asking her to do temporary trials and so forth. And the other is in the middle. He's a civil rights lawyer, so it gives us an opportunity to have the base. So this is not the point of any politician, any political persuasion, any political end of the spectrum, but it is to try to find solutions to get our country where it ought to be. Now, with that being said,
Dozell, did you say you have? Sometimes you cut out just a little bit on my screen. Did you say her name is Fern?
Yes.
And she is a little bit more to the right than you are. Is that what you said?
Fern is probably a lot more than I am. That was a gentle.
Fern is, she's what?
She's far right.
Well, that's great. That's great. You know, that's the way we start. That's why it's called the dialogue. So good deal.
And that's it. That's it. So tonight's show kind of emanated, and I really wrestled when I was putting the schedule back at the end of December. I was wrestling back and forth. Should we tackle this topic? I didn't want it to be just about 1-6, but certainly the 1-6, everything I saw doing 1-6 kind of helped to put this show on the docket, so to speak. So listening and looking to everything that has occurred, I want to ask you all, how do you feel about our lawmakers refusing to recant the precautionary conversations they had with leadership and the president's chief of staff and even the president? How do you all feel about them recanting it? And all the way from Mitch McConnell to Mike McCarthy, Senator Graham from Carolina, South Carolina. How do you all feel about that? And I mean, what can we do to put the country first?
David?
Well, I think that, you know, in a democracy, it's the people we choose to elect. You know, the representatives are, are elected officials. And I think we as voters, as good citizens, need to take some time and really educate ourselves about the people who we're voting for, and not be obsessed with political party. I've, the idea that, one party is such and such thing, and this one's liberal, this one's hyper conservative or whatever. That's, I think often that's not true, or it's as true as we like to think it is, especially when you drill down to who the candidates are. I thinking about some local races that I watched when I was living in Tallahassee, where the most liberal candidate in the race was the Republican, and the most conservative was the Democrat. So I think we need to not make our political parties so much our identities and start judging individual candidates. But that takes work. That takes work. It means going out and educating ourselves as to who is running for office, and not just who's the president, but who's your state representative. Who are your judges? Here in Florida, we have judicial campaigns, and I don't think most people pay much attention to them, but we pay a lot of attention to who's going to be on the Supreme Court, but it's the trial court judge that's going to determine your children's custody, or whether you get bail, or what the sentence generally is if you commit a law violation. So we need to pay attention to those people and really embrace the democratic process.
Joselle, can I ask you to clarify your question? Are you troubled by the fact that Kevin McCarthy gave a speech on January 6th when they came back after being, in hiding from the group that burst into the Capitol? He was describing it as a, horrific event, and now he's minimizing it. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
And he was not the only one. That's the thing.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
And well, I'm not. And Dave, this is not. And I promise. And I mean, I'm really not trying to make this Democrat against Republican, conservative against liberal. I'm just trying to say that we heard which sounded like America speaking out and saying, Mr. President, pick up the phone and go get in front of TV. Let's bring this to a halt. And which was the sound of reason.
I don't think Mitch McConnell has recanted at all. And, full disclosure, I lean towards, I ran as a Democrat 30 years ago. But I was retained on both ballots. So I like to think I'm neutral. Mitch McConnell said that night that it was horrible. And he hasn't minimized it since. He voted with Nancy Pelosi to certify the election results. So I think what's happened is the insurrection failed. And so that's why I think our democracy is solid. The insurrection failed. Before everybody convened in the joint session to count the electoral votes, they thought that there were going to be, I did a little research before I started here. They thought there were going to be 4 or 5 states that were going to contest election results from other states. And after the insurrection, only 2 states were contested, that being Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So it backfired a little bit. And I think the people that denounced it that night sincerely were very, very, very sincere. And I don't think Mitch McConnell has backed off of that position at all. What I think has happened is, let's talk about counting electoral votes and what was at risk on January 6th. What they were counting, you need 270 votes to win. And so 2 states challenged the election results were challenged. Even if those objections were upheld, President Biden would have had enough votes to be certified as the president. And that is not being recognized in the media, but I think it's recognized by Mitch McConnell. He knows President Biden is the president, and that's why he's blocking the president's legislation. So I think Kelly Lofgren was very courageous that night, and I don't see that she's changed her position. She actually withdrew. Georgia was one of the states that the election results were going to be contested. And she said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And when she backed out and nobody else stepped forward, no other Republicans stepped forward, no other senators stepped forward to challenge the state of Georgia's results. I just think our democracy is very, very solid. What happened afterwards is people don't understand that even if if Wisconsin and Pennsylvania's votes were thrown out, the votes for President Trump would be thrown out too. It's not, the whole election is set aside, and all those votes don't count, Republican and Democratic. So once Kelly Lofgren, who was supported by Trump, once she decided she had to put country first, there was no possible way voting to certify the election results, voting not to certify the election results. It was a done deal. It wasn't going to keep President Biden out of office. If neither candidate got 270 votes, then Congress would decide who is the president according to how the Electoral College works. And Congress, we know, is made up of the majority is Democrats. And the Senate would pick the vice president. And our Senate is Republican right now. So I just think it's a beautiful, beautiful system. And I think it's working very well. The people that voted not to certify the election results that night, I think the number 147 is, passed around all the time. There were 147 people that voted not to certify these election results. Well, they knew they had hours when they were hiding or confined. They knew it was a ceremonial act for Vice President Pence to certify the election results. Nothing was going to change because there weren't enough states that had their votes subject to an objection. So I think the system's working really well.
I mean, yes, we did overcome that insurrection or whatever it's been categorized as a protest that got out of hand. But do you all feel, Dave, that had they been able to get to the gallery as was really attempted, that it could have at least held up the democratic process, which was part of the strategy that had been prepared in early December, was to disturb the process? Do you think that was a real possibility, which would have at least stalled the certification of a duly elected president?
Well, I think the thing that that I would be concerned about with something like the insurrection is I don't think that number of people is going to take down the U.S. government by themselves. Even though there were thousands of people there, the U.S. government and the people who support it is really an overwhelming number, much larger than the people we saw storming the Capitol. But I think it certainly could have sparked more violence. One of the really heroic things that went on here was you didn't have a bloodbath. I think a lot of the Capitol police officers would have been very justified in using deadly force to defend the Capitol, but they didn't do that. They put human lives above property, and that is a very enlightened attitude. That is something that I hope is a very American attitude. Is that, and I think it saved our country a lot of heartache. I think we would be in a different place if hundreds of people had died that day, or thousands of people, God forbid.
We went in November of 2000 Y2K in a very bitterly contested election, very close election. I think it was, and I don't have the exact date in front of me, that the Supreme Court basically overran the Florida Supreme Court and made George W. Bush the president. It was at like mid to late December. And it was a peaceful process, not a popular process with everybody, but at least a peaceful process. Where this was, I don't have any doubt that this had some intent of being a protest that got out of hand, and you're so right, Dave. That could have been a horrific situation that we had lost more lives. We lost police officers' lives. There was a protester who was killed, and I commend, as former law enforcement, I commend the officer that protected the Congress people that were in there that afternoon, because only God would have known they were very vehemently coming after Mike Pence. We saw how heroically Mitt Romney was turned around and taken away from those. I just think it was a very dangerous possibility that we faced on that day. And the question I'm bringing this up, and didn't just overlook this, is that it seemingly everything is escalated. It escalated from what happened in the Michigan State House about a year to a few months before. It was an escalation of what we saw in Charlottesville when the white supremacists that made very bold statements. There was a young lady who lost her life that day. And then we saw white supremacists fully dressed in white coming out of the protesting from the Lincoln Memorial a few weeks ago. And it's things like that that make me wonder, and that there's some other things we'll talk about, but that in particular. And we have to look at, okay, I'm with you, Victory. Democracy won that day, but I just wonder how many times does it get pushed to the brink before there's an insurrectionist mentality in the country that will overcome, they can't overcome the whole military, but right now we're looking at states' rights. We've got, when we'll talk about this in a second, government voting, the federal government's being kind of kept at bay right now because states are passing these laws, and it says it's states' right, which to me as an African-American, that's code word oftentimes for racism. But I'm just asking, aren't we flirting with the democratic process when violence is put forth, purported like this, and you go to the Capitol with the express intent of at least holding up the vote, maybe stopping it for a season, and even the very real possibility of getting your hands on a United States congressman, or worse yet, the vice president. Well, what do you guys feel about that? How real do you think that was? Or how dangerous was it?
Dozell, Vicki and I were having a conversation before the show, and we were talking about our work in the legal system. And one of the things that's so hard that can make that job so hard is when you're dealing with people who are not being civil, and how that's just a soul-sucking experience. And I really think that as a country, we really need a strong return to civility. If you look at how some personalities and some politicians. Some politicians are more entertainers than they are legislators at all, in my opinion. And their whole entertainment is about bashing the other side. When you looked at personality, and I'm sorry if I'm going there, but I'm going to go there. If you look at a person like Donald Trump, I never heard a policy idea out of Donald Trump. All I heard was bashing of the other side. Now, it may have been there, but that wasn't what I was hearing. I heard about the way he talked about Democrats. I heard about the way he talked about anybody who did not see the world the same way he does. And I really think that part of what we've got to do is really work hard to bring back return to civil discourse. Just because you and I don't vote the same way doesn't mean we're enemies. It doesn't mean we hate each other. Just because we have different ideas. Maybe we're liberal, maybe we're conservative, maybe we're Christian, maybe we're atheist, maybe we're Jewish, whatever. We have much more in common than what we have in opposition to each other. And we don't have to hate each other. And we don't have to talk about each other like we're enemies, because we're not enemies. We're all Americans here.
Some of the problem is with trash TV. And I think about this a lot. When I was a kid, you go to the grocery store and you would see on the front page of the National Enquirer that aliens had landed and captured a couple of citizens and conducted experiments on them and then turned them loose. And, as a kid or a naive adult, you think, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Eventually, our culture learned that the National Enquirer and the Star, they're there to sell papers and they don't actually report on the facts. Well, now we have trash TV. And I think the pendulum is going to swing the same way. So if anybody asked me, what's your news source? And you said, David, my current event source is the National Enquirer, people wouldn't take you seriously. Mm-hmm. So the people that watch the non-network news organizations, not NBC, ABC, CBS, they're getting fed trash. And nobody has figured out that investigative reporting is not going on. And when they do, then the pendulum will swing back. I was at a gas station and I live in a small town, and one of the members of my church came up and said, have you ever felt so threatened, so not free? And I said, well, he's far to the right, and I know that, and I love him. He's a great guy. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said the red light law, and I said, oh my gosh, I haven't heard about the red light law. I better go research it. I haven't read it, I said, but I feel very safe. I said, I live in this small community and you and I can talk about this civilly. And he said, yeah, that's great. That's great. And he said, but I don't know what to tell my kids. My kids say they watch this news station and then they go to the network news and they can't tell what's true. Well, we've got to educate people what's true and what isn't true. And I think eventually people are going to figure out there's a lot of trash TV feeding trash to them. That's what fueled this insurrection, was false information. And eventually people are going to figure out that even if, it was a done deal. It was a ceremonial thing to count the votes. It was done. Nothing was going to change with the insurrection. That insurrection was a demonstration of loyalty to Donald Trump, not the demise of democracy. That demonstration, and the reason is Donald Trump, he still uses our legal system. He's still playing within the rules. He files a lot of lawsuits. He accepts a lot of final judicial determinations. He just wants to question. He has no other explanation for his loss. It's like a kid that goes to a baseball game and thought they were going to win, was sure they were going to win, and the other team had a great day. So the only thing you can say is the refs threw the game. It was rigged. That was rigged. That's all Donald Trump had, and his followers believed it.
So they brought up the point that we have we are a and that's a byproduct of politics, that we are personality based. Sometimes we vote on a person's charisma, their charm, their ability to get our attention, a great speaker. All of those are things that draw us into some politicians. We've coined it, and Vicki, you've so well reminded us that the news media is about selling ads, and so if I purport right news, if I purport left news, which one's going to get us the most ads? And we understand that, so we do have to just kind of listen to everything to a point, and just kind of like feed. When I went to seminary, I'm not a Southern Baptist. I went to a Southern Baptist seminary. I know. Anyway, I went to a Southern Baptist seminary, and I went there almost like with a chip on my shoulder, because my thing was don't give me any of this right wing theology, because I don't want to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. I'm a liberation theologian, and so that's where my periscope will direct me to. However, I could see truth, and so I was told to see truth and spit out the bones. I don't eat fish, but I was told if you eat fish, you eat the fish, you eat the meat, you spit out the bones. So that's what I went with. But we seemingly have lost that ability to do that. We cling to whichever side is complicit with our political theory, and that's the side that we cling to. So
nobody wants to do the work anymore. Nobody wants to do the research. I know, Dozell, I'm certain that your dad read the newspaper every day. I just know that about your family. Yeah, my mother read the newspaper every day. That was their source of information, and that's a slow process. They have to write it up. The editors edit it. Now nobody wants to read, and everybody wants the sound bites, the quick sound bites, and nobody reads. And I'll give you an example of the voter rights controversy that's going on. There's two acts, and I don't even know if people understand that. There's the John Lewis Act, and then there's the People's Act. The John Lewis Act is in response to a 2013 Supreme Court decision that set aside Section 4 of the Civil Rights Act in 1965. Because they set it aside, there were 9 states that had to have pre-clearance before they could change election policies. Those 9 states, that they gave data about how Mississippi, Louisiana, states like that were suppressing African American votes, and so they had to pre-certify. The Supreme Court struck that down in 2013 because they were relying on data from 40 years earlier, and things had changed. And John Roberts was the author, and he mentioned that we have now African American governors. African American people are participating, they're being elected. And so that decision said, if Congress wants to go back and look at it again and decide what states should be scrutinized or pre-certify, Congress is free to do that, but they can't rely on data from 1965. That's all the John Lewis Act is responding to. It's just an updated version of pre-certification, that it's a way to get a declaratory judgment from a court before the election occurs, and it saves a lot of time. It's a good act. Sorry, I'm not a politician, but I think even Senator Manchin supports the John Lewis Act.
Let me put a pause, because I'm about to see Senator Manchin in 1 second. Let's put a pause here. Let's take this midway break and come right back, and we're going to pick right up with voter, quote unquote, voter suppression. Okay. So because of the holidays and the good cheer and the love and all, we've tried to keep that festive spirit. With that being said, the ladies from moregogiggacreations.com bring Dialogue with Dozy every Monday night. Those of you who don't see it live, I never worry about the numbers when we're live. You look at it, we look at the data, you go back and look at it later. You look at it at your choosing, either on Facebook or YouTube. And we thank you for it. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about moregogiggacreations.com. You see the great job that they're doing. We have our little Brady Bunch screen. They sign in on the one of us who we're talking. We're in remote locations doing our own home studios. They're able to bring us in a very professional profile. moregogiggacreations.com. Latoya, Makia, and Kia and that group, they just do an awesome job. If it's web building that you need, you see the website, moregogiggacreations.com. See them and let them handle all of your virtual needs. We know the pandemic is over, but virtual is here to stay. So wait, let me take that back. Forgive me, nurse. The pandemic is not over. We know it slowed down for a season. And so we're getting back in life, but we're going to always do virtual stuff. moregogiggacreations.com. Let them handle all of your virtual needs. We also shout out every night here on the Dialogue on Monday nights. We shout out Showering Love, showeringlove.org, Showers by Grace. Sister Jeannie Arbaugh, she's scheduled to come on in a few weeks. Jeannie and her group have 2 converted city buses that were basically donated from local bus companies. They go into high homeless populations. One bus has 3 showers, one has 2 showers. But guess what? Those buses are equipped with brand new clothing that's donated. Brand new clothing. They're no use anything. Our homeless population, brothers and sisters, come out of the shower. They dress in the new clothes. They lotion. They go out. They get haircuts right outside in the parking lot. They register as voting. Listen, theologically, we say that our God is a God of another chance. He's not just that. God is bigger than that. God is the God of another chance. Not a God of a second chance, but God of another chance. And that's what they do. They're like angels right here on earth. They go into the high homeless populations and are blessed. That's showeringlove.org. They just bought a building, an administrative building. Go on their site and see how you can be a blessing to go to showeringlove.org. Listen, we took a break, but we're back at it tonight. We gotta do Are You Serious? And Vicki was just about to get into him. We're going to mention him right now. Senator Manchin, are you serious with this very perilous lead, if there is such thing, with the 50-50 split in the Senate, only the vice president being able to sign into law to vote to tilt the scale, and with the filibuster act standing as an obstructionist tool oft times and passing meaningful legislation? Why do you still put D in front of your name for Democrat? Should it at least be I have absolutely no idea what your thinking is. I know you're in conservative West Virginia, but why label yourself a Democrat when you're not helping the cause? The Build Back Better Act, you have cut it to shreds. They have negotiated it. It has been sliced apart. You walked away from the table. We just can't understand what side of the fence are you really on. Joe Manchin, are you serious? How are you doing this not only to your constituents, one of the poorest states in the nation, one of the states that could benefit the most from many of the actions that are outlined in the Build Back Better Act, and you stand in the way of it, just you? Is it an ego? Are you serving your own self-serving needs with the coal industry? Joe Manchin, are you serious? Hey, bruh, the stakes are far too high for the stuff that you're doing right now. Is it self-gratifying that you're able to stand one man to make that difference? I almost want to say go over to the other side. At least we know what side you're on. Joe Manchin, the John Lewis Voting Act that we're just speaking about, talking about good trouble, and you're blocking that. You're offering a counter to that, you don't need to. Just be a man of conviction and stand up. You've been voted into the Senate from conservative West Virginia. The people will respect you bringing some bacon home and helping them. The people will respect you looking out for all people. Is that really what you want to do, John? Or are you falling into the mindset that let's suppress votes there? John mentioned, if you're going to be a Democratic senator, hey, step up to the plate and be a man. Stop this obstructions. We get enough from that from the other 50 partisan voters on the other side of the aisle. Joe Manchin, Democrat, are you serious? Are you serious? Brought you every week. Listen, I want to try to look at some of these comments. Henry, thank you for sounding. My question is to the panel is, can someone convince me that what took place in January 6th by Trump was not the definition and character of, what's that, Satan? Well, we get theological. That's certainly what we could, I'll just say it like this. The scriptures say, I think I know a little bit about them. The scriptures say, I wish that you were either hot or cold. So if it was not of God, then you know where it was from. Okay. Jan asked, she said, I worked in the Senate and around the U.S. Capitol in the U.S. Senate. And as a congressional staff member, lobbyist for industry and a journalist for 36 years. In those 36 years, I never saw that level of disdain for America, our government, or any violent event. I used my French language skills to voluntarily tour France and to tour French and other diplomats around the Capitol because I had the identification authorization to be in the Capitol and use the subway between the Senate, House, and Capitol. I think I cannot be disingenuous. That which happened on January the 6th was far beyond what should have happened. And why Merrick Garland is being so passive with Donald Trump, because he may have not been the author, but he certainly was the executioner. It was him who said, let's go down to the Capitol. Those are his exact words. Let's go down to the Capitol. And he really raked Mike Pence over the coals for exercising his constitutional duty. At least he had the guts to do it. Trump couldn't even be enough man to stand up and be there for Biden swearing in. And by the way, we got a lot of things. We're just getting into voter suppression. The John Lewis voting rights bill that Joe Manchin is kind of standing in the way. I'm really wondering, is the ego or what's causing him to stand in the way of all of this stuff? Trump has claimed that he lost votes. Votes were stolen. They cried that they stopped the steal. Every state, in fact, some states, Arizona found that Trump, Biden had more votes. In every place that there's been a recall, Georgia, Vicki, you said it, Pennsylvania, it's nothing has been proven. Court after court has disproved the votes were stolen. Why can you something?
Dozell, the record was
like this?
Dozell, the record was made, though. The people that felt there were irregularities in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania, their voices were heard, and that's what a democracy does. Their voices were heard, the record was made, and the votes were certified.
But isn't it dangerous? Isn't it dangerous?
Oh, of course it's dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, democracy isn't easy. It requires a lot of character. And Vice President Pence had that character. You know,
that day, he had that character that day. He since backed away from his disdain for what happened, for his life being in peril.
The people that are backing away now, that's just to get Trump's favor, to get the favor of one person. The voter rights acts that are, or the states that are changing voters' rights, they have to do something because the insurrection failed in that when the runoff came in Georgia, the people that stayed home were rural white people. So now they have to do something to make it look like the system's been fixed. That's why all these states are passing voter changes. Some of the changes are purely administrative.
Let me ask you all something. I'm just going to put it out here. I'm wearing brown today. As America has become more brown, more black, and more brown, we saw it happen in Georgia. It was the Atlanta suburbs that pushed Warnock into office, Ossoff into office. It gave the presidency, Biden won the presidency there, won the electoral votes there. Isn't it that the states that feel that they are losing numbers, they are trying to suppress voters, minority voters, the poorest percentage of voters who would be more difficult? See, I always thought that and I know these are elements of the John Lewis Voter Rights Act that has this in place to make voting easier for people as opposed to more difficult, which
not necessarily easier. It sets out the ground rules for what a free and fair election is. These are the parameters. But it doesn't dictate to the states how to run their elections. It's just broad parameters. The changes, I read the Georgia act that is controversial. First, Trump thought he had Georgia in his back pocket. He thought he had Kelly Loeffgren in his back pocket. She's a Republican. She stood up and said, I can't do this. I'm not going to contest the numbers. So he didn't have her in the back pocket. The changes in the procedures in Georgia are, okay, you can't have a bus now with people voting on the bus. You can't have drive-up voting facilities. There were things for COVID. People didn't want to get out of their cars. They didn't want to get sick. There are accommodations for COVID that are not in Georgia can't do again. But I don't think there's anything in the Georgia bill, and I'm sorry, that restricts voters' rights. I think it's the gerrymandering, legislative gerrymandering, that's different. But as far as Georgia goes, and our president is going to be down there this week, he's going to be talking about voters' rights. And Georgia wasn't even one of the states that had their votes contested. Nobody challenged Georgia's rights. So,
yeah, but Texas has voted some of the most stymieing voter suppression laws of any, and of course, anything that's crazy is going to happen in Florida with this guy in office. Dave, let me ask you, how do we rein back the pendulum more to normalcy and to civility? We had a long conversation about that. How do we rein it back, or is it possible? And let me predicate the question with this: the night that Trump was elected, ironically, I was riding with the producer and her family. We were riding to Washington so that her young children could say that they went to the White House when the first historical black president was in office. And they were driving, I was asleep, and I heard Florida go down. I've heard Ohio fall for Trump. Then Florida went down. I said, this thing is serious. And I said, God, Trump? And then by the time we got to Jacksonville, I learned that it was official, that Trump had pulled an upset. And putting my faith in God as opposed to any humans, I said, okay, so we're going to, we elected a man who ran crazy to the right and did all of this crazy stuff to get elected. And I had in the back of my mind a meme that I had seen written. It was a quote of him saying, if I ever want to be president, I run as a Republican because they're dumb enough to vote for me. And I say, okay, he has a great opportunity to work right down the middle. he has an opportunity to work right down the middle because he has no real political allegiance to either side. He can be a real populist president, but he went further to the right, crazily to the right, grabbing white supremacists and all of the like, more so than Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan used puppy words. He blew dog whistles, and then he just came out and just basically said it. So, Dave, what can we do to bring this to a more civil society, politically?
Well, my view is, and poor David, he's not getting a chance to talk, but my view is you just don't take the bait. You don't escalate the rhetoric. When Trump won, it was kind of a surprise. We were surprised and shocked as the votes were tallied and things came in. Late in the day, we found out that Hillary Clinton lost. So that teaches us late results aren't necessarily inherently trickery or rigged. They happen. It takes a while to count ballots. And so don't take the bait, do the research, figure out what's really something we should worry about. I'm a woman, and when my grandmother was born, she couldn't vote. And imagine what things were like in the 1918s, 1919, before women got voters' rights. I'm sure that people were saying, oh my gosh, the country's going to go to hell in a handbasket if we let women vote. And it didn't. Same kind of frenzy was, oh, we can't have these African-American people register to vote or to vote because they're going to take over the country. Well,
So
we have
that
one
leads,
president. Everything's fine.
that leads me right into, and Dave, let me ask you this. So in 2008, we thought that we had arrived as a nation. We thought that we truly were a post-racial nation because we did the unthinkable. I mean, I'll just be honest. I never in my lifetime thought that I would see an African-American president. I thought the apex, the possibility of that, the closest of it was during the Democratic primary in 1988. Jesse Jackson, for a hot minute, led the field. I thought that was the closest we'd ever come, at least in my lifetime. And alone, this thing happens. Then it looks like we turn back the clock. How do we get back to somewhere in between, Dave, between where we were? Oh, and let me throw this in. Hold on to that question. Let me throw this in. A lot of people were very dismayed with the George Floyd incident, Martin Arbery, and all of those things. But we've seen juries step up and do the right thing in both cases. But what was more, in view of what was going on in the White House, what was more consoling to me was that I saw protests across this nation that were not led by Black Lives Matter. They were led by white Americans. You saw white folk at the front of those protests from Portland, and I know Portland may not be the best example because of the violence, but from Portland to Miami, you saw white Americans leading the challenge. So, Dave, tell me, just how do we get back to where we were and get away from this madness that we're seeing from Charlottesville to Michigan State House to the Capitol on January? How do we get back to that?
Well, Dozell, we don't ever go backwards, right? You don't want to go backwards because you talked about the progress that we've made as a people, as a culture. And so going backwards is not a possibility. I do think American democracy faces some real challenges. The fundamental question to show is, what is American democracy in peril? And I would say that American democracy does just face some real challenges. There was a very good book that any of your readers, and I don't have any connection to the authors, but it's How Democracies Die by two Harvard political scientists, and they examined democracies throughout the world and what are the characteristics that you often see in democracies that generally will evolve into autocracies. And there certainly are some parallels that are very disturbing. And Donald Trump is I don't think he's a conservative. I think he really is an autocrat. He was not interested in the rule of law, other than using law as a weapon. That's one of my concerns in our modern times, is that we need to make sure that our legal system remains free and open to everyone. That we have access to laws and to judges who care about outcomes. And that our elections are not just money driven. I personally think that one of the big threats to our democracy is the monetization of campaigns. I think the Citizens United case, which was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, my personal feeling is it was wrongly decided. I think that at least in my profession, we're seeing a kind of a shift in the judiciary towards, I don't even want to call it textualism. It's really kind of a legal positivism, where the idea is that the courts are not concerned with outcomes, that it's just about textual interpretation. I think that courts need to maintain a connection to the outcomes of their decisions. I think that it is of importance. So those are all challenges that we have. Before Trump, we saw things that I think should have been warnings to us. The Bundy situation out west, where people were taking up arms and occupying government property, and were acquitted by juries. That's the amazing thing to me, is how those cases did not result in successful prosecution. Those are all things we should pay attention to. We also need to pay attention to the inequities in American society, especially in the area of working class America. The income distribution and the educational inequities, to me, are really big deals. Antonin Scalia, in one of his opinions, wrote about the U.S. Supreme Court, and I don't agree with Scalia on a lot of things, but Scalia had his moments of real insight, and I think this was one of them, where he talked about the fact that everybody who sat on the Supreme Court during his tenure either came out of Harvard or Yale. And he talked about the elitism. Even though we have, say, ethnic diversity on the court, everybody came from the same pedigree. They came out of positions of extreme privilege. We need to make sure that the United States is a country where there's opportunity for everybody. Because if you're locked out, why should you buy into the system? So I think those are all things we've got to work on if we want to preserve democracy.
I think that you hit on something, and again, as a minority, yes, I think that I think the last 4 years showed us that how dangerous things can be. Listen, I was a narcotics officer, so I had a gun all over me everywhere. I despise guns. I know the need for them. I despise them. I know I'm all right with the amendments to the law. I'm all right with it. I just personally despise guns. But we just went overboard. We overtake a state capitol, we overtake the state house in Michigan. We overtake, thank God there was no shootouts at the Capitol. But so we become this society where I'm just concerned it's on the brink. So it's not just about minorities, it's about poor people. And that's where the inequities lie. And even though the Supreme Court had Harvard and Yale justices, you still had Clarence Thomas was not a person of means. He just, according to him, he came up by his bootstraps. So,
well, like I say, Scalia was very critical of the fact that all the judges on the court were taught by basically the same professors, came out of the same school. And even today, you've got two Supreme Court justices that all went to the same that both went to the same grammar school.
Some of them work for the same law firm.
Absolutely.
Right.
And today, at least here in Florida, being a member of the Federalist Society is almost a necessity to get a judicial appointment here.
Yeah.
We need diversity in all ways. And
Well, Dozell, I know the topic for discussion today is democracy, in trouble. And I just would like to summarize my views. I'm optimistic. I think it's working. America voted Donald Trump in because they thought he would make a difference. He served for 4 years, and they voted Donald Trump out. They voted him out. That is democracy. He's a one-term president, one and done. And now President Biden's there. Let's not minimize that President Biden beat Donald Trump by 7 million votes. Democracy is based on votes. Your vote is your voice. And, I'm optimistic.
But Vicki, we can't ignore how close this could have come to what happened in the Capitol. At least it could have stalled the process.
Right.
And if the vice president had been kidnapped, only goodness knows, or worse yet, what it could have done to. Listen, I want Janice to come on. I asked her to come. We're going to run about another 20 minutes, 24 minutes or so. And I asked her to come on and kind of lend, she's got a kind of more pronounced opinion about this thing. Janice, of course, she's our co-host often, and we're cousins, first cousins. Jan, these are two trial, Vicki is retired. I think you all been on together. Come on, share what you've been saying, Jan.
Okay, hi, good evening to everyone. I hadn't planned to be on tonight, so I'm indisposed, if you will. But I couldn't not comment on a few things I was hearing, and definitely for the sake of information integrity. As I stated in the comments a few minutes ago, I worked in the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, the United States Senate, and the United States House of Representatives as a congressional staffer, as a journalist for 36 years. And never did I ever see any violent activities, nor did I see the type of disdain that we saw January 6th of last year, 2021. In fact, when I first got out of college, out of the University of Michigan, and moved to Washington to work for my senator, Senator Donald Regal, who was the senior senator of Michigan at that time, I used to take naps on the grounds of the Capitol, which was directly across the street from my office in the Dirksen Senate office building, the exact office that former Senator Kennedy held before he became president. The disdain, the violence, those individuals were not tourists, as I stated. I have language skills beyond English, which include French, having studied in France. So when I got back to the States, I used to be called upon to tour foreign diplomats around the Capitol. Those who were Francophones spoke French as well as others, Japanese, Swedish, whatever. Again, I've seen lots of years in and around the United States Capitol. Never did I see what happened January 6, 2021, which was a violent insurrection to overthrow the U.S. government. And definitely, Section 3 needs to be instituted so that the former president can never hold an elected office again at the local federal level, because he condoned, conspired, encouraged an insurrection against the United States, something we've not seen since the Civil War.
Weigh in, guys. Weigh in. If you have questions, go ahead. Janice, a comment.
I think you're right on, Janice. I think you're right on. There is a way to keep him out of office that isn't political, that would require bipartisan support. Mitch McConnell doesn't want Donald Trump to be the next president either.
He's too wishy-washy, though, Jan. He's not. I mean, he's too wishy-washy. He's not. I've seen Mitch McConnell when he is going into something and going into it with all passion, and he's not doing that with Trump. He's like
Committee in the United States
He
Senate.
doesn't want to draw attention to Trump. Trump flourishes when his name is in the media, even if it's negative. What the Republicans need to do is they need to step up. Those 147 that voted not to certify, they need to play Donald Trump's game. They need to primary those people that are up for re-election. And so the Republican Party, they're not all Trump supporters, and they've got to figure this out. If they don't, then the Democratic vote is going to be exponential in the midterms. They're thinking it won't be, but
Dave, are you aware of any filing or any brief? I think the NAACP has already started filing to try to stop some of this voter suppression in these states. They're all real red states. And my question is, America should be a nation. If we're the land of the free, the home of the brave, and all of that stuff, we should be the nation that makes voting the easiest thing possible. Verifiable, yes. Yeah. Outrageous as it's coming to be, no. So do you see any briefs that are coming forth? And this other thing of states' rights. This is my bigger question. Can you see the federal government stepping in and overtaking some of these laws that are being stepping in as they had to do during civil rights and Jim Crow law time about some of these suppressionist laws that have put limitations on how people can vote?
Well, I think that the first thing that will need to happen is there will need to be lawsuits filed and judicial decisions rendered before the federal government's going to do anything. I think that that's really going to be the starting point. And there are lawyers that are concerned about those things and that are working on those issues. I don't really know what's going on in that area right now. In my practice area is consumer rights law, and so I'm very aware of what's happening in that area. But in the voter issue, I don't know. I do think that the federal courts are really going to be important. Federal judges are, for better or worse, and I mean there's a pro and con to it, but federal judges are insulated better than really any, at least here in Florida, the state court judges, from the political process, right? It's a lifetime appointment. And so, that's where it's the rubber's going to meet the highway. The question is, what is the philosophy and tenor of the U.S. Supreme Court? Because such cases, I think, will eventually land there. That, for better or worse, our Supreme Court, whether Justice Roberts wants to acknowledge it, has been politicized. At least the perception of it has been. And that is largely due to Mitch McConnell and the way he has handled the hearings on
Merrick Garland.
Merrick Garland, yes, and I think that was a real wound to the American judicial system. But
it did. Here's the bad thing about it. It didn't stop there.
No,
he kept a duly elected American, re-elected American president from his judicial selection from getting voted on, and he escalated the Ruth Bader Ginsburg replacement through, and that wasn't even hypocrisy. He just did it, just railroaded.
No, and
Jan, and we got two lawyers on. So you see, Jan, the possibility of, well, with Joe Manchin in office, it probably would never happen. But could you see the thought of them trying to increase the number to kind of balance out the judicial philosophy of the court?
Well, I personally think that the court, and I know people disagree with me and make very good arguments in disagreement, but I think when you look at the U.S. Supreme Court and the number of justices per our population, and the population when we in the mid 19th century, when we settled on 9 judges, we're very disproportionate. We have fewer Supreme Court justices per members of our population than really anywhere in the world. And so I personally think that just on a data-based analysis that we actually need a larger Supreme Court, and that might be a way to diminish the politicalization of 9 judgeships, right? If you had a court of, say, 30 judges, right? I mean, imagine something different. Say we had 30 judges, you'd always have judges coming on and off. Every president would get to appoint a number of judges. It wouldn't be such a critical thing to get and one individual appointment. And you wouldn't have the same panel on every case. So
Vicki,
Vicki,
y'all weigh in on that though.
Vicki may not agree with me because it's one of those sacred cows in American jurisprudence, right? And understand, I love this court. I if they had baseball cards for Supreme Court justices, I would collect them.
Well, as an aside, Donald Trump did commend Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He didn't ignore her death. He lowered the flag right away. He has a lot of flaws, but he still respects the courts. When judges are appointed for life in the federal courts and the federal courts of appeals, I like that because there's no knee-jerk sudden shift in who's on the bench. And so I like that. You only appoint so many each president. 30 Supreme Court judges, I winced at, of course, because I sat on a court with 7 judges and we had panels of 3. And depending on the panel, the outcome would change. And I think that's very dangerous. Then you get into how are the panels selected and who's making those choices. So I had a tough time getting 2 judges to agree with me on panels of 3. I can't imagine the nightmare of getting 30 on board, and dividing them up into smaller panels to me is just ripe for manipulation. But you know what? There's both sides of this. So
let me ask you, Jen, you work with Congress. Have you ever seen a time when partisan politics, when we made decisions based? I know, and I'm not naive to the fact that there's one party here and there's one party there. But have you ever seen a day that partisan politics played such a big role as it is now? You can't get one senator on the other side to vote for the Build Back Better Act. You got a Democratic senator that's scared to do it because he's in a Republican state when his state's the poorest state in the nation. Do you think we'll recover from that, Jan?
I think we can recover from it. I think that the status of our economy will drive that in short order. To answer your first question, I went to Capitol Hill in 1982, and I've seen Republicans, diehard Republicans, when faced with the facts, hard, cold facts, and faced with the will of the people, acquiesce to the will of the people. For instance, I sat in committee with Congressman John Conyers when the Martin Luther King holiday bill was passed out of committee and voted on in the Congress, both chambers, to become law. And Ronald Reagan signed it into law, the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday legislation, which was opposed for 18 years after Dr. King's assassination. So that's just one example of how Republicans can come together and unite with Democrats when it is for the good of the people and in recognition of the will of the people. But I think this Congress, I mean, I have lobbied as a lobbyist as well as a Democratic congressional staff member, negotiated with Newt Gingrich. I've negotiated legislation with a number of Republicans that were very challenging to work with. However, they had something that I do not see, and you stated it, with these Republicans in the Congress, particularly in the Senate right now. They have a lack of integrity. And the only ones who are really voting their conscience and voting with integrity are those who have the shield of money, of big money in their pockets, meaning inherited money, such as Congressman Peter Meyer out of Grand Rapids. His family owns a chain of grocery stores, very wealthy family. He has the shield of money that allows him to vote his conscience. Adam Kinzinger out of Illinois, who is not going to run again. He has the shield of not having to run again, that he's voting his conscience. And obviously,
does he come from money? Does he come from money?
Kinzinger? I don't know that his money is that long.
Yeah,
However,
I don't
he's
think
not
he's a monetary shield, but he's a veteran. And
he's a
He's not
veteran.
running again.
he's got a veteran.
He's not running again. He's not running again, so he doesn't have to raise money and be at the whim of factions that he has to raise money for. So that's a shield that allows him to go against the grain. Liz Cheney. She's allowed to vote her conscience because of the dynasty that her family represents in the Republican Party. So those people are voting with integrity, unlike all too many of the other members of the House and the Senate that lack simple integrity. And I will say, when I had to go toe-to-toe with people like Newt Gingrich on various pieces of legislation that I was working on as a congressional staffer or as a lobbyist for industry, he had a modicum of integrity that is missing now.
That's go ahead, Bill. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'd like to jump in with something.
Mine is almost like a radical question, and that is with these voter suppression laws that's being passed, and with secretaries of states being placed in all of these red states that can literally suppress the will of the people. You could have a Ronald Reagan type landslide, and these secretaries of states in these various states could not certify those ballots, and we could have a constitutional crisis. Do you all foresee the federal government, and then of course we go back to that phrase, states' rights? Do you all see the federal government having to weigh in and make a difference to bring balance to this thing?
Well, one thing I would say is that, even with the pressure that was put in the last election, the system itself held the ground. The secretaries of state did their jobs with integrity. The election people, really almost without exception, protected the integrity of the ballot box. But I think the way you turn this around is really at the voter level. And one of the challenges I think we have in American society today is profound alienation. I think a lot of Americans feel left out. They don't know, we are, I was very privileged a couple of years ago to travel around the world, and I visited a lot of different countries. And one thing I came away with, one is the weight of American culture in the world. We're incredibly influential. But the other thing is we're huge. If you put us up against, Denmark's the happiest country. But Denmark, we have states bigger. We probably have ranches in Texas bigger than Denmark.
Yeah.
We are a huge nation, and we are a multicultural nation. And I think that a lot of America is feeling very lost and feeling very lonely. We see a rise, especially in the working class white culture, of what they call the diseases of despair, right? Depression, addiction, things like that. People are dying, and part of where I think this political radicalization comes from, and where people like Trump get their power, is out of that alienation. Because in a time when, right, if you look at the Pew study on religion, and I talk to a lot of clergy people, the numbers of people attending churches is declining very rapidly. And, we don't have, especially in white culture, you don't have ethnicity so much. If you look at me, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm all this kind of stuff, right? Unlike, the immigrant population that came here. I remember reading a history book about Utica, New York, my hometown, where if an Italian person walked in the German neighborhood, they would beat each other up. That's unthinkable in at least white culture today. All right, that seems silly. But I think one of the fallouts of that is people don't have a sense of connection, right? And I think especially politicians or people who want to manipulate people hold up a sign and say, well, you have to stand up for white power at a place like Charlottesville, or, you're a conservative, you have to be with the conservative cause, or, you have to put Trump flags on your boat and ride them around. I recently saw a house that actually had a sign up that said "No Democrat Zone" in the front of their house. I can't imagine such a thing. It's silly, right? But when your political identity becomes your identity, when your political inclinations become your identity, I think that's where radicalism can come from. And I think it's rooted in this alienation. As Americans, we belong to each other, right? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter skin color. It doesn't matter a sexual orientation. You're my neighbor. And we have to remember that. I don't care who you vote for. If your house is on fire, I'm going to come help get you out of there, right? Because you're my neighbor, right?
Dave, I tremendously appreciate everything you're saying. I think we all do. But I guess I would ask the question: is America really? Are we really there yet? Are we? Next week, we'll be looking at Dr. King's legacy. Are we really moving towards that beloved community?
Absolutely.
Or did 4 years of Trump tear us down from it?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. Look, when I was in high school.
How do we recover? That's the more relevant question. How do we recover?
Oh, absolutely. When I was in high school, I routinely heard people use the N-word here in Florida. In my life today, I don't hear that word used. When I was in high school, and this is in 1980, 82.
You don't, but others do. There are still.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason we don't hear it is because of the ramifications, right? A political law or a beatdown.
No, because
I think it's just that's where we are with that.
No, I will tell you that when I was in high school, if you used it in the white community that I lived in, nobody criticized you. That wouldn't happen today. You would be criticized for using that type of language. The homophobia that was present when I was in high school. If you were a effeminate boy, it was open season on you. The adults were not going to protect you. I recently did a case where I was defending a young man for wearing skirts to school, and the other kids in the school stood up for him. Right. So we are evolving. We are becoming, the Enlightenment continues to unfold. Right. We are becoming an enlightened people. We're not done yet. Right.
Yeah.
But we have to understand that we belong to each other. Right. We are not just individuals. We are a nation of people, and we belong to the world too.
Before I ask you your summary questions, I got to ask this question, Jan, Vicki. I got to ask you this. If Barack Obama had led a group of Black Lives Matter individuals down to the Capitol, as did the 45th president, where would he be judicially right now?
Oh, I think that definitely there would. And as you know, I have worked in the Obama administration. And I've worked in the Trump administration as well, as a bureaucrat. But we all know, and let us not be naive, that if the the ethnicities of the rioters, the insurrectionists on January 6, 2021 had been Black people, African American people, and not any other people, not Hispanic, not Filipino, not Asian, but Black people. First of all, there would have been ramped up Capitol Hill police and District of Columbia police and National Guard. All of that would have been out there. You remember 1995 when you came to Washington for the Million Man March. The city of the District of Columbia, Northern Virginia, and Maryland closed down because of the fear that they had of 1 million Black men potentially coming to Washington. I mean, this is in our lifetime. I hosted Dozell, some other cousins, and my father, who all came into Washington for that event. Governments from those 3 jurisdictions closed down. The federal government closed down, and many nonprofits and businesses closed down because, oh my God, we can't be around. Oh, save white women. Don't let them be on the train, the subway, because of these Black men coming in. And it was a peaceful event. It wasn't a protest. It was a love-in for Black men to come together, and it was peaceful. The Black Lives Matter protests, First Amendment protests that took place in 2020 were peaceful, except for individuals who came there who were not of the Black Lives Matter movement, quote unquote, to cause dissension and violence. And so I understand it, and anyone who's not naive knows that if the insurrectionists, January 6th, had been Black people, there would have been a very different outcome in terms of they would have never even been able to breach the rope and stanchions around the Capitol to even get into the Capitol, let alone break windows, to spray bear spray, hit police officers with fire extinguishers, to hit them, to gouge their eyes out. I mean, I have friends who are still on the District of Columbia Police Department. The commander of my former district, where my house was located on Capitol Hill, is now the chief of police for the District of Columbia. He's a Black man. He knows good and well that it would have been a totally different story if the entity, the organization that pulled the permits, requested the permits from the DC Police Department and federal grounds were Black. There would have been National Guard. There would have been all kinds of precautions. White privilege allowed those individuals to come and riot, and let's not kid ourselves. The former president basically gave orders for the Capitol Hill police to stand down. Let's not kid ourselves. That was all created by the former president.
So it's not humorous, but Henry says there would have been dead people everywhere. Do you think we would have had more casualties, at least you all?
Oh, we know that there would have been black people who, if they had been the insurrectionists, they would have been shot first and foremost before even getting up the steps to the Capitol. If they had moved those horses, iron gate horses, the rope and stanchion, to even get on the Capitol campus, they would have been shot at that point, not after breaking windows and fighting police officers. The United States treats Black people very differently. And so I know, having worked in that environment for 36 years, my entire career, I know it would have been handled very differently. There are Black members of Congress who took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, who have been stopped from getting into the U.S. Capitol or buildings in the House of Representatives or the Senate because those Capitol Hill police officers didn't recognize them, or they didn't see their Congress lapel pin, and have stopped them from coming into the place that they were elected to be by the people in their jurisdictions. So please don't be naive to think that Black people, if they had been the insurrectionists, they would have been shot and killed. Yes, there would have been dead bodies all over the place.
Okay, so we unfortunately out of time, but I want to give everybody a chance to give at least a 90-second summary of guys, how would you summarize? We didn't get to really look at everything. I think we're kind of down the middle as to whether or not our democracy is in peril. Just give us a closing statement. We'll go around the horn with Vicki, then Jan, and then we'll ask you to close us out on that. Dig. We can just keep it to 90 seconds. I'll keep the producers happy.
Okay, my take is educate the American public, everybody, that trash TV is trash, and they have to ignore it, just like we ignore the National Enquirer. You let it exist, but you don't rely on it. That's all.
Okay. Jan?
Well, I would not be for suppressing the freedom of speech of any American citizen. I am a journalist after all. However, what I know to be true is that the Republican Party, as it is configured now, is peddling fear, hopelessness, anger, hate, and triggering violence. And that is a recipe that is creating our democracy to be in peril.
Good summary. Good summary. Dave?
I would say we have to be the change. I don't have control over what other people do, but I can affect the way I exist in the world. And I think that I need to make connection where I can. I think that civil discussion is paramount. If we're going to go forward as a country, it's going to be our choice. I don't think we're going to go back to yesterday, but I do very much worry about the rise of an autocratic government in the United States. I think there are risks to our government, but I also think our government has many strengths. And so I'm hopeful for the future. But I think it's up to us. It's in our hands, and we have to be the change.
Dave, Jan, Vicki, I cannot say thank you enough. Vicki, I think we kept it pretty cool tonight. We didn't get too far. Janice, I just recruited her on. I won't tell you when I asked her to come on with how she said she was tired or lack thereof. But thank you for always lending your voice and always being available to us. I think we hit on some surfaces. I didn't bring this show on tonight to create divisiveness, and my pre-conversation with Dave really helped to keep that focus and the whole conversation said. I think it was solution-based, and I'm glad about that. I'm glad for the optimism that you expressed, Vicki, that in spite of it all, we still have held force, and that's all we've got to hold on to. And Jan, I thank you for always bringing it straight as the is, no sugarcoating it. Yes, we got to do better, and we have to stand tall and represent what's right. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you. And have a great new year. May this be the most blessed year of your entire lives.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, Janice.
Oh, absolutely. No problem. Be
It
well.
was nice. It was nice meeting you, David.
Nice meeting both of you. All three of you, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye-bye.
To my Henry Glenn is my son-in-law, and I've just been waiting for the right topic to bring Henry on. Thank you, Henry, for all of your comments tonight, man. If you saw me there smiling when there was serious dialogue going on, it was because of your comment. It was spot on. We know what that was. If Obama had still been president, may have even been a dead president. That's not funny, but that's the truth of the matter. There would have been, as Janice said, bodies strewn out all over the place. I'm going to say, as I see it, for just a second, but usually we do this at the beginning of the show, but America and the world lost a great humanitarian in the person of Sir Sidney Poitier. Since the dialogue was last on, beautiful picture. Sidney Poitier has always been, and this is not patriotic or sexist, but he's always been a man's man, meaning he's always stood up for what he believed in. He had beliefs that were far ahead of their times, or beliefs that could have gotten him killed, but he stood up anyway. You know what I liked about him, Henry? He put his money where his mouth was. There's a document that was put online, and I wish I would have shared it, that he and two other entertainers put money to defend civil rights laws in the segregated South and to help fund the NAACP in some of their attempts to break Jim Crow laws. Sidney Poitier was a gem of a man. He was an awesome entertainer, a brilliant mind, but just a kind-hearted individual. And you know what's happened? We've lost so many people in the last 24 months that losing someone now is not even a shock. And that should never be. We're saddened. I was riding with Griff to Orlando when we got the news that Colin Powell had perished due to COVID. I wasn't even shocked. I mean, and so I don't think we should ever it should ever come to that we feel that we're about death. But we just say to Sidney, brother, we'll see you in the dawn. God bless you and bless your sweet soul. And we thank God for sending you as our way. As I see it tonight, we tackled a tough subject, so tough that I spent a lot of agonizing inwardly and with the producers and so forth as to whether or not we should bring such a show. We were led to bring on some of the best minds and hearts and spirits that we could bring in, and they brought the best of scholarship, experience, optimism, and just plain old truth and integrity to tonight's show. That's what made it a good discussion. That's what made it a great dialogue. That's why I'm going to push it on Facebook, boost it or whatever we have to do, because people need to see how we can sit down and intelligently have a discussion, even about tough situations and conversation. Dialogue with Dozie, we're all the better for you guys coming on. We are as good as our guests and our viewers, and we are so happy to all of you for all. I've been communicating with Kim. He was not able to make it. He didn't get in time, but hopefully we'll see him. Next week, we're going to discuss the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, we have a gentleman that we grew up knowing. Kim was a friend of his son. I coached his son, and so I had a great interaction with Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is now elevated in age. He's a senior citizen, a seasoned citizen, and he actually took part in the protest with Dr. King in St. Augustine and other Florida cities, and he was recently awarded because of his civil rights exploits. We're going to allow him and others to help us examine the legacy of Dr. King and where would he be if he was still with us. To all of you who make the dialogue what it is, we thank God for you. We're so grateful for you. Keep watching us. Tell your friends about us on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube page. We're going to do a contest in the near future to try to boost our YouTube subscribers. But tell your friend that we have a very lively dialogue. It started during a pandemic. One little short, fat, bald-headed man sitting in front of a Facebook camera discussing issues and just kicking it with the viewers to what has now become a super production by GoGetCreations.com. Listen, Dialogue with Dozie, we're back at you next Monday night. We'll try to keep it within the realms of at least 90 minutes. It has been a pleasure. We're looking to see you next time. We'll see you this time next week, 8 o'clock Eastern. Dialogue with Dozie, Facebook and YouTube Live.